Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Weekly Waypoint. Today we are playing Guild Wars 2, which we haven't done in a little while, and we're doing that for a very good reason, of which you are probably aware. And that's that today we're going to be talking about the game announcements that stood out to me across the plethora of gaming announcements this Summer Games Showcase. Or Summer Game Fest or whatever. The words Showcase, Fest, Direct, announcement, it's all gonna get mixed up as we go along. Let's not worry about it too much. The only thing we're really missing is a Nintendo Direct, which is fine because they'll probably do it next week and I'll talk about that next week. But yeah, just to give State of Play a very quick mention before we get into the main event here, because I don't own a PS5, so I don't pay all that much attention to Sony, but I did watch this one. And the things that stood out to me from the State of Play were Marvel's Wolverine, which looks lovely and bloody and gory, and also Insomniac, they don't tend to miss, and it looks like they're not going to miss here either. Of course, this is not going to be coming to PC, sadly, so I'm not all that excited about it. Also, God of War Laufey, Laufey, I don't know how to pronounce her name. That was really cool as well. I am a Deborah Ann Wall fan, so I was very excited to see her in the role. I like that this God of War game is exploring like a multi-mythological realm kind of thing of like, where do the gods go when they die? They can't get there because for whatever reason the gate is locked. Therefore, from all the different mythological realms, they've all kind of like ended up in the same place, and it's some mythologies we're familiar with, like ancient Egyptian and like Japanese mythology and stuff like that, and it's some stuff we're not familiar with, like the cube. And I love that because it's got a bit of a Ragnarok feel to it, which of course is a weird thing to say when we're talking about God of War, because that's what the previous game was called. But no, it's got a bit of a full Ragnarok feel to it is what I mean, and I think that could be really fun. Again, no, don't have a PS5, it's not coming to PC. I guess I'll enjoy it from afar. Also, Control Resonant popped up in like every single showcase. I haven't made a specific note of it because despite owning it on multiple platforms, I've yet to really get very far through Control, the original game. It is like £3.70 right now on Steam, and I am tempted to just pick it up on Steam and try again, but I don't know. Everything about Control is my jam, and it looks like they're going more Devil May Cry this time around in terms of gameplay, which, yeah, sure, I can fuck with that. But on to the next one, Summer Games Fest. That showcase included the Guild Wars 3 reveal, and I'm going to spend a decent bit of time talking about this because it's probably the thing that I'm most excited about out of everything that was announced. Now, for context, I'm not fully caught up on Guild Wars 2. As you can see by my main quest in the top right corner there, that's as far as I've gotten. I'm that far through Living World Season 4, and I own up to Secrets of the Obscure, but I do need to get caught up. However, maybe I don't need to get caught up because Guild Wars 3 is a prequel, and I love that because we're going to be in awe. We're going to be in an age where the human gods walk the land, and the human gods are one of my favorite parts of the Guild Wars lore. Like, humans came from another world, and I'm not a big lore expert for Guild Wars. I'm still playing my way through the main story, but everything I know about the human gods is kind of fascinating. And, we dealt with some of that stuff in Path of Fire as well, and I found that stuff to be greatly intriguing. So, yeah, I'm very excited about Guild Wars 3, and I think, honestly, the way that ArenaNet are treating the Guild Wars franchise is something that should be studied by every other MMO developer out there, because they are firing on all cylinders right now, and I am so fond of their approach. If you watched my video last week about Destiny 2 and the reason why that game lost me and stuff like that, everything ArenaNet's doing with the sequel to Guild Wars 2, it's almost like the antithesis of what Bungie decided to do with Destiny 2. Because not only are we getting Guild Wars 3, and I'll talk more about that in a moment, but they're also continuing to not only support but actively develop content for Guild Wars 2 and Guild Wars Reforged, which is a fairly new thing. I'm pretty sure they teased an expansion with Guild Wars 1, by the way. But Guild Wars 2, they've basically come out and said that over the course of the next year, after the final Visions of Eternity patch, they call it release, but you know what I mean. They're going to have a quieter year where they focus on going back, doing like a Hall of Monuments thing, which is like, again, a bit of a mirror to Destiny, like their Monument to Triumph or whatever they call it, right? It's their like evergreen, these are great big long goals you can work towards, which will give you like cosmetics for your character or whatever, I assume. But obviously it will also carry stuff forwards to Guild Wars 3, just like Guild Wars 1 did to Guild Wars 2. And over the course of a year, they're going to go back and do some quality of life updates to past content, things like the base game and then each expansion. And they're looking for feedback on what people would like to see there. If anyone remembers my particular problem with Guild Wars 2, it's like this long-standing unaddressed bug where when you finish a cutscene after a long story mission, sometimes your character will freeze in place and then disconnect and you'll lose like an hour of progress. I would like to see that fixed, or at the very least given a workaround with a checkpoint after the final boss, which is what they started doing in those instances after Heart of Thorns, which I greatly appreciate. And given that they've said they want to go back and rework the Zaitan fight at the end of the base game, which is famously a terrible, terrible fight, like a massive disappointment of a fight, at least in terms of mechanics, maybe not so much spectacle. I hope that they take the time to be like, okay, and we're going to put a checkpoint here, because the amount of times I ran that goddamn story instance to see if I'd fixed the bug, and then I hadn't fixed the bug, I tell you, I almost gave up on playing this game entirely. I talked about it a few years ago. So yeah, I'd like to see them fix that. But sorry, I got away from myself a bit there. The exciting thing is they've said after Guild Wars 3 is released, they're going to go back to doing, in their words, major yearly Guild Wars 2 content updates, which I assume they mean expansions, but I don't know, maybe they mean like Living World seasons or something. And so Guild Wars 3 is very much not a replacement for Guild Wars 2. They've been upfront about the fact that, yeah, obviously they're going to have to move developers onto working on Guild Wars 3 as it gets closer to launch, and that's going to mean some slightly more scarce content for Guild Wars 2, but like hang in there, and you're going to have a whole new Guild Wars to play, and then more new Guild Wars 2 content will be underway as well. And I think that's just so delightful. And they've also said that the fact that Guild Wars, they haven't said it in as many words, but basically the fact that Guild Wars 3 doesn't have to be a replacement to Guild Wars 2, because this game will keep running and getting expansions and updates and stuff, one would assume, from what they've said. That means Guild Wars 3 is free to be its own thing, and they've talked about the fact that it's like an action combat game and stuff like that, and it's an Unreal Engine game, and I'm expecting it to play more like the gacha games. Like, I don't want it to be a gacha game, don't get me wrong, but I mean more in terms of like, you know, the gameplay of Genshin Impact. It's not like that faux action combat like you see in Guild Wars 2 and Elder Scrolls Online. It's just action combat, and I get the feeling that's what Guild Wars 3 is going to be. And I'm very excited for that. And as I've already said, I'm very excited about the fact that the setting is going to be We're going to be interacting with the human gods. We're going to be actually seeing some Guild Wars, although people have talked about the fact that in the lore, the Guild Wars didn't start until like hundreds of years after the time period we're supposed to be playing. But the Steam page does say that we're going to be experiencing Guild Wars, so shrug, don't know what's going on there. Maybe there's some forgotten Guild Wars, or maybe they're just going to retcon it. I'm not too fussed. But honestly, I think this is how you do an MMO sequel, and it's no mean feat, right? It's like, oh yeah, just continue making the original while you also make a sequel. But given the costs of game development nowadays, but in terms of both budget and money, in terms of both budget and time, I think it's probably a sound strategy to be like, yeah, we're gonna make a new game, but we're also gonna continue keeping up with the old game. And while we're gonna have to divert some resources, you get the impression that Guild Wars 3 is being developed by probably like a separate team, right? And I just think that's fascinating. And you know, I don't really care about WoW right now, but if I was to cast my mind to World of Warcraft and what a sequel could look like, if they made WoW 2 but said that WoW 1 wasn't going anywhere and they were going to keep making expansions for it and stuff, and WoW 2 was set in like a far future or far distant past, that would be incredibly exciting to me. Like, I think this is the only way to really effectively do an MMO sequel, and I don't know how feasible that is behind the scenes. I don't know if Guild Wars 3 is going to turn out to be a flop. I will say, when this trailer was going and they were talking about like, oh, it's going to be the next generation MMO and all this stuff, I was rolling my eyes a bit, because how many times have we heard that, and how many MMOs have flopped lately? But if anyone can do it, it's ArenaNet. They are the only developers that I know of who have successfully pulled off an MMO sequel in the past, and everything they've said about what they're doing here is very exciting and sounds like it should work. Anyway, that's all I've got to say on Guild Wars 3. As you can tell, my most anticipated announcement that we've heard so far, but also not the only one, so let's get on to talking about some more of them. Another game we saw during Summer Games Fest showcase was Star Wars Zero Company, which I was made aware of a little while ago. This is actually a known quantity already. It wasn't a straight up world premiere. But it's basically Star Wars XCOM, except it's, first of all, by some X4Axis developers, so it's got some pedigree there, but also they're looking to evolve that particular genre by adding in some like heavy narrative elements such as BioWare style choices matter dialogue options and stuff like that, and I think that is like a no-brainer, and it's a surprise that we haven't seen other games do that before. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not the biggest strategy guy, I keep trying to be. I'm desperate to break into that genre and really find a game that clicks with me and like kind of like learn the intricacies of it and get comfortable in it, and because I think there's so much interesting stuff in there that appeals to me. And Star Wars Zero Company is another one of those where I'm like, I gotta get into these games because this shit looks like it's up my alley. A couple of other notable announcements from Summer Games Fest was Attack on Titan 3. Now I haven't played 1 and 2 and I don't know how good they are, and I don't know how good this will be, but it says that you get to play through the entire Attack on Titan story from start to finish, and if it's as good as Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm is for that kind of thing, then I can absolutely see myself picking this up, because I love Attack on Titan, and I will absolutely jump at the opportunity to relive this story in another medium. And also, Hot Wheels Infinite Rush. No, I'm not kidding. If anyone remembers the Hot Wheels Unleashed game that came out a little while ago, that was really, really good. Like, you know how Lego Batman is currently taking everyone by storm and everyone's been taken a little bit wrong-footed by the fact that they enjoy this like game so much that's aimed at children? It's a little bit the same with Hot Wheels Unleashed, where there's just so much love and care put into this racing game about these like metallic little toy cars, and there's so much detail on them and everything. Well, that was made by Milestone, the people who do the MotoGP games, I believe, and this new Hot Wheels game is also being made by Milestone, except it looks to be more of like a open world, almost Forza Horizon style Hot Wheels game, so that's absolutely going straight on my radar. But after that, the real show began, and we saw the Day of the Devs take place once again, and there was lots of really good games in there. The two that really caught my eye were, first of all, there's one called Threads of Time, which is this HD 2D JRPG looking game, which is a time traveling story where you go to like prehistoric times. You know, they're doing the Chrono Trigger thing. And while I've never played Chrono Trigger, I do love that as a narrative device. In fact, the game I've played that did it the best that I've seen so far is a game called Last Epoch, which is a Diablo-style isometric action RPG. Unfortunately, it's kind of going down a shitter right now a little bit because it got bought by some publishing company who's reneging on promises of not putting microtransactions in the game. But the game's base story did a good job of like Act 1 is set in this period of time, and then Act 2 is in this period in time, and you can recognize some of the places, but they look very different because now it's like post-technology and stuff like that. And I just love that stuff. And Threads of Time, this RPG looks gorgeous, and hopefully it lives up to everything that it's promising. I know that there's been a bit of a history of indie RPGs not necessarily doing that, so I'll hold out and see the reviews and stuff, but hopefully it's as good as it looks. And then Ukulele Kart is a Super Mario Kart looking kart racer game. Like, it directly takes inspiration from that specific entry into the Mario Kart series because the tracks are all very 2D and the item boxes are like painted into the ground and everything, and it looks very charming. I've yet to play a ukulele game, but this could be my first. Next up, I did decide to watch the Xbox Games Showcase in the end, mostly for like, you know, games that might release on Steam and such, and I am glad I tuned in because we did finally get a brand new Spyro game. Spyro A Realm Beyond is being made by Toys for Bob, who did the Spyro Reignited trilogy and Crash Bandicoot 4, and that's pretty exciting to me. If I remember right, there was a little bit of a question as to whether Toys for Bob would be able to do like a Spyro game. I think, didn't they have one in development and then they thought they'd have to cancel it when like they got dropped by freaking Microslop or whatever. Like, I forget the lore, but I remember Phil Spencer then being like, we'll reach out to them and see if we can work something out in terms of licensing. So I guess that happened. Either way, the Purple Dragon is finally back with his own brand new game. And we haven't seen much of it so far, and what we have seen of it, he's been flying the entire time, which has me a little concerned because they've tried that before and it didn't work out very well. But it does look like our favourite purple boy is growing up a little bit, which is very wholesome to see. And yeah, it looks good. I like his new design, I like the look of the world that we've seen so far, and I'm excited to play some more Spyro. Thank you for releasing this. Also, I'm mostly out of the Xbox ecosystem at this point, but I guess, you know, I watched a whole showcase, and if I'm being honest, yeah, Gears of War, E-Day, and Fable did look pretty cool as well. I just don't know if I'm gonna go for them. Really trying not to fund Microslop these days, at the very least outside of Bethesda and Blizzard games. Speaking of which, Bethesda did not have much to show this year, which I hope means they're hard at work on the Elder Scrolls 6. But we got a Fallout 76 patch trailer, and Doom The Dark Ages DLC, and an ESO trailer that makes me never want to play ESO again. It was a really bad trailer. Anyway, next up, we've got the Future Games Showcase. When I mentioned this in a Discord server a little while ago, I had someone ask me what the Future Games Showcase really shows. So I'd say, for those interested, it's more like a general smattering of like AA size games, if you know what I mean. The things that stood out to me this year was AGX GP, which is a Wipeout looking anti-gravity racer where you can shift your gravity between different like 90-degree angles of track, or shift lanes across the track pretty quickly to avoid oncoming obstacles, which seems like a pretty fun evolution of the genre. We also got a game called Deadroot, which is the snail with a sword game. You might remember when I was excited about the bird with sword game known as Death's Door. Well, now we've got the snail with sword game. And yeah, I guess I'm going to keep my eye on that. Now you might be wondering just how a snail can wield a sword. And the answer is it has arms now, and I'm still not quite sure how I feel about that. I've yet to fully reconcile that reality with my feelings, I guess. But sure, if birds can have enough grip to hold a sword, then why can't a snail? They also finished off with a deep dive look into the game Exodus, which is made by some ex-BioWare developers, including the writer of Knights of the Old Republic and Mass Effect 1 and 2, which... yeah, I mean, talking about pedigree in gaming, I'm not gonna lie, right? Like, there are a lot of times when, especially at Summer Games Fest Showcase, they will say, here is a game from from the creators of a critically acclaimed title who left that studio to go off and form their own development studio, and this is what they're working on now. And I feel like so often that promise falls flat. Like, look how many Blizzard alumni studios there are, and how many of them have produced hits. Like, it turns out it takes a particular combination of chefs to create a special sauce, not just one guy, right? That's kind of a shit analogy, but you know what I'm saying. And so I don't tend to get all that excited about the pedigree of a new game development studio. I mean, I know I mentioned that with another game earlier, but still. So I know some people have been following Exodus very closely because of this, but I hadn't really. But I did watch this deep dive, and yeah, it looks pretty good. It's got a sci-fi world, which I think looks interesting. I'm curious to explore it, especially see what's going on with the Awakened, and the combat looks fun. I will say it doesn't look like as much of an interesting sci-fi universe as Mass Effect, but it looks like something I would like to check out and I would probably have a lot of fun with. My main gripe with the overview we got, actually two things. First of all, the guy who was narrating what was happening sounded so bored and disinterested. And I get you can't necessarily have every single developer media trained or whatever, but come on, it was a little dull. It was a little dry. And secondly, I feel like they showed us too much of that game in terms of the story. Like, they just kept telling us, like, and then halfway through the game, this happens, and you find out this, and you have to make this choice. And it's like, okay, well, that seems like something it would have been great to discover for myself. And also a lot of, like, the this choice or that choice things they showed were very much like, will you save lives or will you murder people because it's quicker to get through them? Like, very non-difficult choices to make. So yeah, I would be surprised if Exodus is as good as Mass Effect. And I've still got some Mass Effect to play that I've never played before. I've still not played through 2, 3, or Andromeda. And I do plan on doing so. Yes, even Andromeda. But I will say Exodus is now on my radar. It looks good. I would like to play it sometime. I hope it reviews well, but part of me is still not convinced that it's not going to be another Callisto Protocol situation. Like, you know, talking about the pedigree of developers who go off and establish a new studio and try and recapture lightning in a bottle again. Callisto Protocol was meant to be the next Dead Space by the original Dead Space creators, and Callisto Protocol was not well received. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that turns out, I suppose. And finally, I'm recording this hot off the tail of the PC Gaming Show, and there were some things there that piqued my interest too. Peaked. The main one, which took me completely by surprise, was Vampire the Masquerade Eternal Whispers, which is a CRPG within the Vampire the Masquerade universe. Now, I like vampires, but I have never gotten into a vampire video game. I've never played any of these Vampire the Masquerade games, for example. They all seem to be pretty action-oriented from what I've seen, and the fantasy of being a vampire running around and shit, I don't know why that doesn't necessarily appeal to me. But a CRPG in that world absolutely appeals to me. Where you're walking around talking to people, you know, you got to figure out what kind of character you're going to be, the choices you're going to make, and then, like, obviously there's going to be, like, turn-based combat and stuff, one would assume. I'm sure that was shown off in the trailer, I can't quite remember now. But just, like, the visual style of the game as well, it looked very similar to Disco Elysium, to the point where me and Reese were questioning if it was made by some of the original devs, but I couldn't find any evidence of that. I've actually not played Disco Elysium, and to be honest, Disco Elysium doesn't necessarily interest me, but this does. This does. I want to be a spooky vampire stalking some gothic streets. I want to explore that world for the first time and see if you can be like a good guy vampire or a bad guy vampire and what the difference between the two is and all that good stuff. CRPGs is as close as a video game ever gets to being a book, apart from straight up choose your own adventure games. And I like that, I'm discovering. I've been playing some... I'm not really talking about games I played this week, because we don't really have time, but I've been playing some Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader lately, and it's a lot of reading, and I like a lot of reading. I've also been playing some Space Marine 2, which isn't a lot of reading, but we'll talk about that another time. We also saw some more of Starseeker Astroneer Expeditions, which is meant to be the Astroneer game, which is more of like a online... Someone told me it was like an MMO style game, and I never got that from any of the previews, but it's supposed to be this kind of perpetually online game, and it's supposed to be a bit No Man's Sky-ish, just in the Astroneer universe, and I'm going to be honest, nothing in the gameplay that they showed me today really interested me all that much, but other stuff that I've seen in the past has, and so I'm hoping it's a good game, because I would like to play that game if it ends up being a good one. And finally, the last game I'm going to talk about today that was revealed, or at least showing off a little bit more in a PC gaming show, was Warhammer 40k, the Total War game that they're doing. As I mentioned a little bit before, I'm not a strategy guy, and I keep trying to be a strategy guy, and I want to break into that genre so bad. I own all 3 Total War Warhammer games, and I've only played some of the first one, but I was really enjoying it until I got distracted, so I think there's definitely some fun times to be mined there, right? And the idea of doing that in the 40k universe is pretty exciting to me as well, because suddenly not only do you have these on-the-ground battles and everything, but the stuff you would traditionally see in a Total War Warhammer game where it's more Civilization style, kind of zoomed out. You got your civilization, you got the world, you got your armies in different places. That's going to be more on like a system-wide thing, right? Like a star system, or maybe there's multiple star systems. I don't know. I've never actually played a 4X space strategy game, and I've always wanted to, because that fantasy seems like a really fun one to explore. Now make it 40k and make it by the developers of, you know, the Total War games. Absolutely, I am in. Just, you know, as long as it's good. I don't ask much. I am, like, pretty close to just re-downloading one of the Total War Warhammer games and starting up a new campaign. The only thing that's stopping me is just that I am playing a lot of games on the go at the moment, and I don't want to drop any of them because they're all quite good. But anyway, I think that's going to do it for me today, so thank you so much for watching this episode of A Weekly Waypoint. This was everything that stood out to me over the past week of game announcements. There were many, many more than I talked about here, and there were many as well that had me going, oh, this looks neat, this looks kind of cool, but I tried to keep it to the ones that specifically spoke to me. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, helps the channel. Also, I don't know if my channel has a thing where you can like hype videos, but if you can, that would be wonderful. Also, leave a comment letting me know what your favorite game announcement was, subscribe for more, and I will catch you in whatever I make next.